Hey there, I'm Sarah Zarella, a portrait and wedding photographer and your host for Wedding Secrets Unveiled. This is a podcast where we cut through the complexity of wedding planning, leaving you with everything you need to know directly from the industry experts. If you want to simplify your wedding planning while having fun, of course, you came to the right place. Join me while I guide you through your planning, starting from your engagement to your big day when you say, I do. After photographing for over 20 years, I am sharing with you tips and tricks to cut through the excess noise. Because I believe from the moment you said yes, your planning experience should be a magical time in your life. Here you'll find episodes that are fun, stress-free, and straight to the point with a fresh, honest take on the reality of what you really need to know about planning your perfect day. Let's dive in. You asked, and we are delivering. You have asked for us to have a band on our episode, so guess what? Today is the day, and I'm super excited to have Kevin on because Kevin actually was the band that my husband and I hired for our wedding, and he will be doing my brother's wedding, and he has done 2 significant milestone birthdays in our family. So I have to tell you, they're one of our favorite bands in my family. So I'm really excited that he's going to give us some of his time today to talk with you about hiring a band for your entertainment. So if you are thinking about getting a band, or if you are looking to hire a band, this is a great episode for you. I highly recommend that you listen to Kevin and all the knowledge that he wants to share with you today. Well, welcome back to Wedding Secrets Unveiled podcast, friends. I'm your host, Sarah Zarella, and we are here with a special guest. I have been trying... For you listeners out there, I know you've been requesting to get a band on. So we finally have a live musician who's in a talented band coming your way for you. So with that said, Kevin, let's tell our listeners a little bit about who you are, who you serve, and what you do in your business.
Thank you. My name's Kevin O'Brien. I am a musician. I'm a bass player. I also own an event band an entertainment company called Ripcord Music LLC. Generally speaking, we were just refer to it as Ripcord. As far as who we serve, I would say predominantly wedding couples. A lot of people, we performed a ton of weddings, a lot of corporate parties. So businesses hire us for fundraisers and corporate galas and political rallies and whatnot. But largely weddings. And I know that's what we're here to chat about today. So that, and as far as what else I do, I handle all the booking and management for the most part for our events. We have 3 bands under the umbrella name Ripcord. At the moment, we've had up to 4. Prior to the pandemic, we had 4 bands. I had to kind of tighten up the ship for obvious reasons at that point. Currently we have 3 really high-end bands. As far as where we land in the wedding market, I would say kind of upper tier in terms of the caliber of the musicianship and the bands, and perform, generally speaking, more mid to high level types of events. We do destination events all over the country and throughout the Caribbean, but our primary market is New England and the tri-state area. And
how long have you been in business for? Or how long have you been Ripcord Music for, I should say?
About 16 years ago. About 16 years ago, I started Ripcord with some friends. This was actually, it's a bit atypical. Our wedding band began from an original band of a different name. It was just four guys writing music together, and started playing some bar gigs, and kind of got into the cover band scene in that way. And then I was freelancing as a bass player back then, playing for a couple different wedding bands, and really began to notice that a lot of these bands that were widely regarded as really top level bands were often kind of just thrown together musicians. They weren't actually bands. It was a booking agent with a video, and I'd get there thinking I'm the only sub, substitute, like a sub on a gig, and we're all just meeting there for the first time, just playing at somebody's wedding. So I began to just think, well, hey, I think it makes a lot more sense for us, this crew of friends who have been playing together and writing tunes together for years, to focus on trying to delve into the wedding world. So I pretty much just started reaching out to all my favorite musicians and people and my musical idols, many of whom lived in Boston and still do, some additional vocalists, and kind of just grew the band from there, because it was, again, just a small 4-piece club band, basically a bar band at that time.
Yes. And I have to ask you, how did you come up with the name Ripcord?
Yeah, that was it was actually, or it is a Radiohead song. We were pretty stumped trying to think of something, and that's just kind of an old trick to come up with names for bands and song titles, is to just look through old albums of your favorite artists. And one of those is Radiohead. Yeah, so one of the musicians in that original crew came upon Ripcord, or thought of that. So that's a great tune there. So yeah, we landed on that. And then I guess probably worth noting here is that unfortunately there are a couple bands with variations of that name. We've since found out, we just kind of stuck with the name, but there's ours is RIPCORD, Ripcord Music LLC. But yeah, there are a couple different bands with variations of the spelling, but that's where we found the name. Yeah, and came up with it.
Yeah, and so for our listeners, Kevin actually did Steve and I's wedding, right? So, yeah. Yep, and since then you've done a lot of different couples together, and then you're actually going to be doing my brother's wedding this upcoming spring, and also to my dad's 80th birthday party, and you did his 70th birthday party. So
yeah,
so you owed me a favor being on this podcast.
Yeah. No, both ways.
Were you with? I'm trying to think, and I know Dan's over here producing, and I know you're not mic'd up, but were you with me when I first met Kevin?
Waterman Grill.
Yes, Waterman Grill. So the story is, Dan. Yes, that's right, Dan. So Dan and I were working a wedding, and at Waterman Grill, and I was, getting married, and Steve and I were in the middle of planning our wedding, and obviously being in the industry, I know a lot of talented people. And so I hired a very talented DJ, a friend of mine, and we were good with that. And then I was hearing you, Kevin, play, and this was a restaurant too. This wasn't even a venue. You were in the corner, and I heard you guys play. And do you remember this, Dan? Mm-hmm. And I just turned to Dan, and I was like, "That's my band." And that's that. The rest is history. And here we are, many years later, doing a lot of my family's events. So thank you, Kevin, for all your talent.
No, thank you. Yeah. That's wildly flattering, honestly. We've been hired by a lot of fellow vendors and musicians and venue owners. And the point being, people who have not only attended hundreds of events, but worked these events and worked with these, vendors, as we were, all called. But you've worked with a ton of bands, you've seen a ton of bands. So there's something that you heard and saw in our performance that turned your head, but also just, I remember sitting with you and having dinner and chatting. And there's a lot more to all of us than just what we sound like or what the photos look like afterwards. It's just the personalities that are involved and what that brings to the overall experience for our couples and for ourselves. We, again, come from a really organic starting point as compared to a lot of the very corporate kind of agencies around, where they're just a ton of random strangers hired, thrown together and managed by somebody who may as well be selling used cars or something like that. It's a much different thing. So, but no, thank you. Yeah, we really appreciate being a part of your wedding, and yeah, Jerry, your father, he's a legend, and that 70th party with the comedy roast and everything, that was a blast, and really appreciate you having us back this year for more of the same. And I guess that could be a good way to kind of point out, actually, is that as I started to mention, we have multiple lineups of the band, and one of which is actually playing your brother's wedding. I'm sorry, no, we're playing your brother's wedding. The other is playing Jerry's 80th this time, just because of booking and availability on that particular day. So I guess one thing that might be good to share about us is that we have this umbrella of Ripcord, under which we have multiple bands. And for all these 16 years, and really, I guess it's probably been more like 12 or 13 that we've had, multiple bands as opposed to just one, is that we're we're now in the middle of some rebranding where we have a new website being finished. We have some new videos that are done and they're going to be launched on this site. And in this process, we're actually renaming or naming some of these individual bands. So as opposed to having Ripcord GB1, Ripcord GB2, GB3, these monikers to denote which band is which, because it's never been a surprise. Like we wouldn't just send any of our bands to a couples event. Everybody knows specifically who's coming there. But the point is that now we have this flagship band, the one that I play in that played your wedding, is retaining the name Ripcord, and our second band that was GB2, Ripcord GB2 for all these years is now called Boogie, and we have a third band called Bellamore, and that's the one that's actually playing Jerry's 80th. Unfortunately, I wish I could be there personally. But,
so which one's playing at my brother's?
We are.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah, and we're bringing a big, like a 10-piece version of the band with additional singers and stuff. And
how about my girl? Is she coming?
Yeah, Ananda.
Yes.
Incidentally, she's my best friend. I mean, she's been with me since I started this 16 years ago. And I'm not just saying that, or over exaggerating. She is the best friend I've ever had in my life. I can't imagine doing this or really just, being, just doing much really without her. We do so much together. We're super close with each other's families, and we travel, and yeah, she's something else. And she's unrivaled. She's wildly talented.
Talented. I mean, there's nothing. Still this day, there's so many things and so many aspects of my wedding day. But Steve and I's first dance and your version, your interpretation of the song that we picked, first dance, is something that still to this day I have visually. I mean, mentally can just remember it and being in that spot. But I think that's also too a lot to be said. Of how I stumbled upon you, because you can tell, and Dan and I talk about this a lot at weddings, obviously there's so much talent out there, but you can really tell when a band has been playing together and there's, I don't even know how to explain it. There's just energy about it. And first, like you said, just putting some musicians together. And so I could tell when we were in that restaurant and you're in that corner, playing, I could just tell you guys had it. But, with that said, I'm happy to share you to all of our audience, Kevin, So if you're looking for a talented band, Kevin has 3. So there you go.
Expand upon that. I think that's what generally people refer to as chemistry, that sort of it factor that you notice and you feel. It's really like a palpable kind of energy in the room. I mean, I've had the pleasure and honor to play with some really, really phenomenal musicians, world-class musicians, people who kind of come through, or I freelance and played in these other bands, and it's a certain thing. But when you have these elite level musicians who are also, like family, like it's very sincerely my family coming and partying with your family and celebrating with your family these days. It has a different we bring a different element to it, because when I look over, I see these people I sincerely love, people I've been performing and traveling with and just joking with and hanging with. And some of us have lived together for years, and some of us have been working together for decades and have known each other for 20 plus years. So that's a really atypical thing. And I think that those relationships, that's what really builds the energy and that chemistry that people feel when we perform, on both sides, like on the stage and from the dance floor.
Absolutely. Well, what I like to do, though, for our listeners is let's take them through the entertaining process. I'm sure, obviously, by the time you got most of your couples on the phone with you, they've already decided they wanted to go with a band. But I can tell you on my end, just being with couples from the very beginning, or just kind of seeing the process, and I'm sure you see it too, the first question is, what like avenue are we going to go in? Are we going to do a DJ or a band? And there's obvious differences, and then there's maybe not so obvious differences. So let's talk a little bit about that, Kevin. Like, what's your thought process a little bit on, like, give me your perspective of the differences.
Yeah, sure. I think for me, it's fundamentally budget. I think I'm certainly biased being a musician, and I have immense respect for DJs. I think there are some incredibly artistic DJs. I know I have a lot of musician friends who are DJs who bring a different element to that performance style than say somebody who might not have that musical background. And there's certainly a time and place for that. But I guess fundamentally it's price point. To me, I don't, again, being biased, I probably shouldn't overqualify this too much, but I don't want to step on any toes or anything like that. But I don't, if somebody's throwing a really high end event and wants to yield the most powerful effect, I don't see why they wouldn't have a band unless it's a financial decision for the primary element of entertainment. What I mean by that is that we generally provide all-inclusive live music or really all-inclusive services for the entire day, right? So we're performing for the ceremony, the cocktail hour, the reception. We're providing sound support, PA systems, sound engineers, all that stuff for everything. And then a lot of the times after the event, there's an after party, and we'll provide a DJ for that. And I think over the, kind of just through the entire day, there's sort of an arc of production, and these different sort of sources or sound sources or experiences are yielded. But I think the main differences between live and live music and DJs are pretty obvious. So a DJ is they're hitting play on tracks. They're a lot of them are more artistic than others in terms of how they're combining these tunes. There's a lot of software that's out there that helps kind of come up with these things to like match tempos and time. And I think that it serves its point and its purpose. And I think that a ton of people have been, a lot of people when they go to weddings, that's what they experience as the kind of standard sort of DJ wedding. And I think that at the end of it, I think it's just people trying to fit everything into a spreadsheet of budgeting. And I think that sometimes a band and or a high end band particularly just doesn't fit by the time they've come to that step in the process. But yeah, I think I don't think that that a DJ a DJ of any caliber can really hold a candle to a really elite band. I mean, we have musicians who are, Grammy winners who have performed with some of the world's best, like, major artists, Beyonce, Michael Jackson, Justin Timberlake and stuff like that. So super experienced. And like I said, the time that we've spent performing together, and really in all of our bands, it's not just our flagship Ripcord band. All three of our bands have these long-standing histories together. I could share more about some of that if interested. But I mean, one of our bands is actually comprised of several family members. A couple that's been married for I think 12 years, and the bass player's brother plays drums. They grew up playing together. The bass player's wife plays guitar and sings backups. So they've been playing together for decades. But anyways, I think that really when you come in and there's, the energy's been building from the beginning of the day, there's a ceremony, the cocktail, people having drinks, and it's time to party. When you have a really high level band performing, there's just a level of energy and air and everything that's just movement and vibrations that we're throwing out into the room that I just don't see any DJs being able to match. I think that it's also it's understandable because I feel like, for decades, a lot of people have grown up going to these sorts of events or watching video, MTV or whatever things on YouTube where you don't actually necessarily see the bands performing. I think I think some of the things for me that I really enjoy is when we're performing and we kind of stretch out a bit more than your average wedding band too. Like we'll have horn players kind of battling and taking solos and stuff. But where I'm going with this is that when people come up and we hit at the beginning of the dance party, I just see jaws just drop and like hit the floor when they're watching our musicians physically play these instruments and making this music live in front of them. It's just a different energy than can be replicated. Again, not trying to step on any toes. I think DJs, a lot of them, they're great MCs and they have the equipment necessary to, like PA equipment to help you get through the event and can add a nice element. And I think that's not really my forte, but I think that I do work with some DJs and there's a distinction in that world where some of them are basically just playing hits. And then there are others that are again, more artistic in the sense that they're using samples and or creating grooves and beats and mashing all that stuff up with different elements from pre-recorded music and making almost like original versions of these songs. But for us, when we come to these events, while we have the ability to kind of completely rearrange these songs musically and harmonically, that's not really where we've landed in terms of our approach. We really hold true to the original songs in the sense that that's what we found most people want to hear. Like when you're at an event, people are getting down. You have like people, there's always a broad demographic at these events, and some people just aren't that comfortable, getting up and dancing. And if they're really familiar with the songs, they're going to be more prone to doing that. If they know the tunes that you're calling, of course, and you're holding true to what they are, like you're not changing the melodies a ton, so that's really where we've come at this, or how we come at this, is that we really hold true to the songs, the main primary identity of the song, the melodies and the harmony. But then we'll kind of mash up songs. We have these really well written transitions with horn lines and various things to kind of connect a lot of these songs, and we add an improvisational element to a lot of this stuff. I guess that's also another thing that's a big distinction between a DJ. If you're playing some, a Lizzo tune, like for us, we have these horn sectionals, like these solis as they're called, that are not on any recording, that are original to us. And then somebody will take a solo, or it's a guitar solo or a sax solo or something like that. That's not something that a DJ can do. And it really does elevate the dance party a lot when you're playing that tune and you go into this instrumental sort of section, have this solo. It's kind of getting everybody fired up and kind of elevating the energy in the room, and then you break into the chorus or into a different song or something like that. That stuff isn't really something that a DJ can do. They might layer something or throw like another like percussion layer or synth patch or something like that to sort of build this sort of faux energy, some noise, like production noise, and then drop a beat or whatever. That can be really powerful, but it's, again, to me, it's apples and oranges.
Yeah. And then also too, so like you said, there is that element of what way they're going to go, but then also too, there's also the element of when they do decide to go on a band, it's really important to make sure that if you are planning, we're talking now about weddings, but if you're planning a wedding, to make sure that you have a band that is familiar with weddings. That's a whole other element.
Absolutely. Yeah. That's something that is really that comes from years of experience. So ensuring that the band that you hire has that is critical, I think. We're most of the couples we work with have hired an event planner, and a lot of times they're able to, drive the bus and maybe rein in a band that isn't quite as experienced. But I've heard so many horror stories from these same planners and other vendors where the band it was like a bar band. They're trying to save money, or it was a band that their friends really loved in college or something like that, but they had never done weddings. And there is a flow, and there are just so many details that come down to weddings. And weddings are expensive. But, there's really nothing inexpensive when it comes to weddings. So when you do the math of like what people are spending on all the food, like sometimes it's like $500 a plate for guest meals or whatever, and all the vendors and all the services added up, when you have that could be hundreds of dollars a minute, or, flying by, thousands, really hundreds a second, really, if you do the math extrapolated to like on a high-end event. If you have a band that doesn't know what they're doing, like how to call songs in an appropriate way, when to time their breaks, how long to do that for, it's a detrimental. It'll play a detrimental role in the overall experience for the couple. And it's, I think, a really experienced band. Yes, you want really incredible musicians, but your point being that you pull on a band that has wedding experience. I highly agree with that. I think that that's there are a lot of things that can throw you for the loop. I guess where I'm going with that is that there's just so many moving parts and so many variables and so many things involved that things can go wrong. We've done events where there's a catering team where it's a mobile unit and the oven broke and the dinner is supposed to be 20 minutes and now the dinner's an hour and a half or something like that. Or, something happens with the weather or the power goes out or whatever. There are things that happen where if you have an experienced wedding band, they're going to be able to navigate that in a seamless way. And from the front, you might not even notice that these things are happening. I say that from experience that we've had some things that could be pretty catastrophic happen with some of these other variables in the background, like catering and whatnot. And the couple didn't even know, based upon how we kind of flipped it.
Well, what we'll do, Kevin, is we're going to take a quick break. And then when we get back, we're going to kind of dive in some, key questions that couples should be asking maybe you or another band when they're trying